I remember being about 5 years old when I first watched Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. I remember it was sometime during a weekend when I sat down and turned on the living room TV, only to see some weird crab monsters attacking some guys with guns and flamethrowers. Then all of a sudden, Godzilla appears and I got interested in watching more. It wasn't long until I saw that the movie had two Godzillas, then some giant crustacean demon-looking monster. One of the Godzillas die and the other melts, and it was over. For a while, my thoughts on Godzilla vs. Destoroyah was that it was strange. Of course, I was 5 at the time, and I just happened to start watching it halfway through with no idea what was going on. But as I got older, I started to find more people talking about the film, and how it's really emotional and considered to be one of the best, if not the best, Godzilla movie. At the time of this video, Godzilla vs. Destoroyah is currently ranked number 3 out of every Godzilla movie on IMDb, just under GMK and Godzilla 1954, and has 4.65 stars on Wikizilla. So after a few rewatches when I was around 13 or 14, I did see why people would think that, since all the attention of the film revolved around the death of Godzilla. Back in the mid-90s, Godzilla's death was a huge deal that even CNN made a broadcast about it. It was time that Toho was ready to give a big send-off, a grand finale, for the biggest star of all time. Toho even made sure it was the tagline, and that it was larger than the title itself. You can even see it on the Japanese Blu-ray. And it wasn't until recently that I've come to realize that Godzilla vs. Destoroyah is only a facade of false hype, for me at least, and I'm sure for some others. I mean, with a movie franchise that is over 30 installments and has been going on for over 60 years, there has to be some contrasting opinion to the majority, right? I mean, Dr. Mifune tore it apart in the Heisei collab video a while back. Now, I'm not here to straight up call people out for liking the film, but I feel like people tend to wear nostalgia glasses whenever they watch it. I mean, as a fan of the franchise, we have already established a connection with Godzilla, so already we would be inclined to like it. Though at the same time, opinions are bound to change over time. I even liked Planet of the Monsters until I realized that only the first and last 5 minutes were good, and that it was just another cliche, boring modern anime with Godzilla slapped on it, and does nothing with the universe it establishes. I even had a dislike for Godzilla 1998 at first, until I actually started analyzing the film and realized that it actually does have some good things about it, like the use of practical effects, Godzilla's design, Roland Emmerich's vision, and Jean Reno. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to go over things that I like about this movie and things that I do not. Starting off with things that I like, because there's not many, unfortunately. For starters, you have the monster designs. The Destoroyah suit is quite the upgrade compared to the Goji suit that was literally falling apart and had a really fat finger. I do like the glowing and smoke effects that they gave Godzilla in this one, that or it's my internal Attack on Titan fan approving, because it's a pretty nice aesthetic. Godzilla Jr. is also a major upgrade compared to the previous incarnation, which is really strange considering that the Heisei series is supposed to be serious. And now Destoroyah. He looks cool, but I'll talk more about him later. The idea of bringing the franchise full circle by incorporating the Oxygen Destroyer into the story and having Momoko Kochi reprise her role as Emiko Yamane does sound very interesting, and that's it. And finally, Akira Fukubi's score, which is good. And now for the things I don't like. I'll go ahead and start by saying that the editing in this movie is just awkward. The first time you see Godzilla, he's coming out of the water, and literally a couple shots later, he's already attacking Hong Kong. And earlier at the very beginning, there's the reveal that Earth Island has been destroyed. I don't know if this was intentional or accidental, but the way the scene is shot is a bit confusing, as if the island just disappeared out of nowhere. That and the atrocious composite shots of Godzilla attacking Hong Kong, as the civilians hardly react to it whatsoever. Also, glad to know that they were kind enough to not cancel any flights as Godzilla and Destoroyah fight. The writing is something I'm not really a fan of. When you boil it down, it's just another Godzilla versus a monster movie, but this time it relies on connections to the first Godzilla movie in order to stand out. But wait a minute, weren't the events from that film affected by Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah? They mentioned Dr. Serizawa using the Oxygen Destroyer to kill the first Godzilla, but was King Ghidorah not present after the change in the timeline? Anyway, the Oxygen Destroyer is relevant in this film for 3 reasons. 1. Some guy wants to recreate the Oxygen Destroyer to kill Godzilla. 2. The Oxygen Destroyer is actually what Destoroyah, clever I know, originates from, as the Oxygen Destroyer indirectly mutated some crustacean microscopic organisms back when it was activated in 1954. And finally, number 3, fan service. Which then brings me to Emiko Yamane, who feels wasted as she does not have a lot of screen time, nor does she feel important to the story whatsoever, other than to say that the Oxygen Destroyer is bad and it shouldn't be recreated. Now hang on a second, Dr. Serizawa destroyed all traces of the Oxygen Destroyer. How do they plan on building another one? Anyway, the connections to the original Godzilla hold very little weight, even if they do make sense, and are only there as a crutch for the writing, as it becomes non-existent as soon as Destoroyah appears. Which I'll give the film this. The idea of bringing back the Oxygen Destroyer isn't looked upon as a good thing, and Destoroyah supplements that as it represents the consequences of the uprising of such weapons. But again, there are 0 mentions of the Oxygen Destroyer after Destoroyah is introduced. Thank you, Delafellow, for pointing this out. And adding to that, there is the sudden introduction of cryogenic weapons that just comes out of nowhere, and when it's used against Godzilla to reduce his temperature and lower the chances of his body detonating, it just makes the Oxygen Destroyer feel more obsolete, especially when a few movies ago, we had a giant robot that actually managed to kill Godzilla before he was revived by Rodan. As for the characters, well, they're just forgettable. Nothing interesting about them. And I swear, if you asked me to name one other than Miki and Emiko, then I would be completely lost. One thing I do find baffling is that a college student somehow knows a lot more about Godzilla than the organization that was designed to study him. Anyway, the characters are really dull, with next to no interesting things about them whatsoever. And there's no real sense of danger, because at this point giant monsters are no different than your shoe being untied once in a while. Also, the one character that makes me want to pull my hair out is this woman who is trying to escape one of the Destoroyahs. I put that in quotes because she's had numerous opportunities to escape it, yet doesn't even bother taking any action other than just to stare and look at it. She's worse than Mikasa in Attack on Titan Part 1. And now for the special effects. They are definitely some of the worst, if not the worst, of the Heisei era. Except for when Godzilla freezes, because that actually looks pretty cool. The set pieces look very fake for the most part. The Destoroyahs are too stiff and can somehow defy physics, with the perfect form being so bulky that it can hardly move. They even use toys. Not kidding, these are real Bandai Japan figures of the Destoroyahs. So if you want to go ahead and buy a movie prop, there you go. Also, not only does Destoroyah have his name because of the Oxygen Destroyer, Toho couldn't trademark the word Destroyer, so they just decided to call him Destoroyah. My favorite part is when Godzilla Jr. is an animatron on a track of some sort and starts sliding when Destoroyah attacks. It's so hilarious that they just can't help but rewind it over and over. And now for the action. They had the audacity to copy Aliens for one scene, and funny enough, it's honestly the best action scene in the movie, even if it's just another case of Takao Kawara shamelessly ripping off better movies. And then there is the final battle, where Godzilla battles his greatest, strongest opponent yet. And here they go. Watch out, he might scratch you when you bump into him like that. Also, Destoroyah has a weird strategy. He pulls up in his final form, kills Junior, dips, pulls up, fights Godzilla for a bit, dips, pulls up as lesser versions of himself, then dips after realizing that was a bad idea, and pulls up again in his perfect form. If anything, that does not make Destoroyah a strong and powerful monster like the fanbase tries to make him out to be. He's nothing like Doomsday or whoever he's been compared to. He's honestly just more of an annoyance than an actual threat. Yeah, he killed Junior and that's about it. But at the same time, he was already beaten by the JSDF and Junior before. Yeah, this is a stronger Destoroyah, one who got over his weakness of fire, but he's killed by the military. Yeah, sure, Godzilla got some blows in here and there, but the military is what really finished him off. I do wish that Godzilla was the one to do so, but I'll go ahead and play a clip from one of Blue Nova's videos, which I will say does make me appreciate Godzilla's death some more.
I've seen complaints about Godzilla not getting to finish Destoroyah himself, though I think that works in the film's favor. Godzilla, betrayed by the very energy that gave him his immense strength, is unable to revive or avenge his only child, and, even in his final moments, he cannot find peace.
And I feel like Godzilla's death just comes out of nowhere, but I guess that's just like death in real life. No one is ready when it comes, and no one knows how to prepare for it when they know it is coming. Except death doesn't force an anti-nuclear message that doesn't feel relevant, since Junior absorbs it all anyway and is revived. I get they were trying to make the series go full circle, but this is just awkward and forced. And adding to that, there is actually an alternate ending, which was featured in the manga as well. And there was also deleted and unfinished footage of Destoroyah's chest beam, which the movie kinda had a build up towards, but not really. Okay, now I just want to take a moment and talk about some of the original ideas for this final installment, because they sound much better than this film in general. Okay, so now I want to take a moment and talk about some of the original drafts for this film, because they sound a lot better than the entire movie in general. The first draft was Godzilla vs. Giant Monster Varan, where Varan would have been reintroduced like Mogira and other kaiju in the Heisei era, but as the antagonist of this film. Man, poor Varan, always being there for the planning stages but never for the final product. He definitely needs more love. Then there's Godzilla vs. Godzilla, where Godzilla would have fought the spirit of the original Godzilla, known as Ghost Godzilla, who was created by artist Shinji Nishikawa, and the spirit would have possessed Godzilla Jr. in one draft and Anguirus in another, thus making Godzirus. And in that same draft, there was also Baragon, and he and Anguirus would have fused to make Baurgirus. This was the closest draft ever getting made as the final film, but was scrapped because Godzilla already fought duplicates of himself, being Mechagodzilla and Space Godzilla. But it still would have been awesome to see that. And finally, Godzilla vs. Barubaroi, which then became Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. This time, they took the Godzilla vs. Godzilla draft and replaced Ghost Godzilla with a new monster named Barubaroi, who is depicted in a way that was similar to the titular creature from John Carpenter's The Thing, where it imitating Anguirus and took on weird forms and shapes. Barubaroi was then renamed to Destoroyah, and was reworked to resemble a crustacean, and with the Oxygen Destroyer incorporated into the character. Now, before I end this video, I want to mention that a while ago, I asked the Godzilla subreddit what the people there liked and disliked about Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. Yeah, I agree with that. That I also agree with. Yeah, I can get on board with this one. The music is nice and the monsters do look cool, even if Destoroyah's stiffness kind of ruins it. But Destoroyah was an interesting concept, just not a fan of the execution. I would personally give it a much lower score based on everything I said, but I definitely see where you're coming from with that. This one's probably my favorite response. I'm right there with you, man. Like I said before, it's probably the best part of the entire movie, so yeah, I feel the same way. I didn't really touch upon the horror element, but it's a nice addition, and yeah, Destoroyah does look pretty silly these days.
While the overall concept is a nice idea for the final outing for the Heisei series, but the outcome is mishandled in almost every way. Godzilla is dying at the start of this film. Destoroyah does nothing more than annoy Godzilla. What Heisei monster didn't knock Godzilla around for a bit before Godzilla gets the upper hand and finishes the fight? People like to talk about how badass Destoroyah is, but really gets its ass kicked a lot. Humans take out the juvenile-sized ones once they bring out the heavy weapons. Junior takes on the flying in aggregate forms okay by himself. Godzilla takes on the final form even though he is in the middle of dying. Did Destoroyah kill Junior? Because Junior is the only kaiju alive at the end of the film. Nobody talks about how Super Mecha Godzilla killed Godzilla. It is pretty much the same scenario repeated. Lastly, Destoroyah at the end is helped to be defeated by the same weapons that had no effect on the aggregate and flying forms that was a third the size of the final form. The humans are pretty much just there to explain things and worry. The only character to actually do anything useful was the pilot of the Super X3. And he doesn't interact with any other character in the film. He shows up, does his job and leaves. He has no character arc. Mickey has no arc other than cry over Junior. The Yamane children have no arc. One keeps saying things that turn out to be untrue. The other is just there to be a damsel in distress. Pretty much everything the characters keep saying turns out to be false. They can't attack Godzilla because it will cause him to blow up. The Super X3 shows up, attacks him, and actually stops him from blowing up. The only way to stop Godzilla is to make a new oxygen destroyer. Nope, turns out they don't need one. Godzilla is going to melt down and it will be worse than blowing up. Nope, freeze weapons stop him. Destoroyah is the only hope of killing Godzilla before he melts down. Let's ignore the fact that when they come up with this plan, Destoroyah is only in aggregate and flying forms, which are a third the size of Burning Godzilla. Also, both forms are defeated by Junior before Burning Godzilla even shows up. They had no idea Destoroyah had the larger final form. The plan the human characters come up with is to lure Godzilla into a showdown with Destoroyah in the middle of the third most populous city on the planet. And it failed because they wanted Destoroyah to kill Godzilla. Not only did he fail to do that, but they created another Godzilla in the end anyways. It's a double failure. They did stop Godzilla from melting down into the center of the earth. But that is because the guy that was the expert on Destoroyah tells them to bring all the freeze weapons to cool Godzilla down. He was never part of any of them talking about Godzilla. He never talked to G-Center at all during the film. So in the end, G-Center did nothing. Everything that worked was done by people that don't really interact with them at all. Lastly, while there was a couple of nice effect shots, most of the time they are mediocre to horrible. The mixing of kaiju with scenic outdoor footage is so bad, mostly because the vehicles and people are oblivious to what is going on. My favorite is people boarding a plane and another plane taxiing to take off, all while a kaiju battle is happening on the runway.
My thoughts exactly. So anyway, there you have my thoughts on Godzilla vs. Destoroyah and why I personally believe it doesn't really deserve all the praise it gets. It's sadly a dull, unoriginal, uninspired film with very little ideas that either work or hardly go through in a movie that's just another Versus installment in a beloved franchise. Nothing more, nothing less. It takes itself too seriously and is expected to be taken seriously, but it ultimately fails as a film. And if you like this film, then good. There's nothing I can do about that. I'm sad to say that it's my least favorite Godzilla movie. And that's all I have to say. Feel free to like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you guys later. Also, I should probably mention that Toho ended the franchise just to make room for Godzilla 1998, and not really because they felt Godzilla was worthy enough to have a send-off like so.